One of the ways to see how there's usually a thought process behind those who put together the lectionary pattern. Why these readings? Why at this particular time? Why this particular? And usually, the big clue is usually Old Testament gospel. There's a very obvious similar theme, and I think, and I think today I want to be able to focus in on. I want to begin by focusing in on that theme, the plight of widows, as presented in the Bible. So in ancient times, if a man died, a husband died, his widow was in a precarious situation if she did not have an adult son to protect her and care for her. And so the widow from the first reading, the widow of Zarephath, she was suffering from the famine that was ravaging the land at the time. Now she did have a son, but he was a little child. Imagine her horror when she realized that she could only scrape just a little bit more food for her son and herself before they would both starve to death. No one cared about her, no one except God, who sent the prophet Elijah to her. But first she had to trust in God. Imagine you get to that part of that story, you almost have to, you kind of clench, ooh. Can you imagine going through her head? It's like, hold on a second. He's asking me to make something for him first, but then make something for me and my son. But it was an act of trust, because you see, at the time too, she had to follow the law of hospitality, caring for the stranger. And God rewarded her generosity. Elijah's successor as prophet for Israel, Elisha, came upon another widow who cried to him, "Creditors have come to take my 2 children away as slaves." Now she had no defender, and she was at the mercy of dishonest judges. We also see this in the first part of today's gospel, where Jesus attacks the scribes who devour the houses of widows. The books of Exodus and Deuteronomy in the Hebrew Scriptures places a curse on anyone who would deprive widows of justice. But the fact of the matter is that shrewd businessmen found ways around the laws to take advantage of these defenseless women. The prophets Isaiah, Jeremiah, Zechariah, Malachi all note that the land suffers the sin of those who abuse widows. Now, one of the most beautiful stories of the Bible is one of my favorite books of the Bible, is the story of a widow and her daughter-in-law Naomi and Ruth from the book of Ruth. If you've never had a chance to read the whole book of Ruth, I recommend it. So when Naomi's husband and sons died, she was left without any support. She told her daughter-in-laws, themselves widows now, to return to their fathers' homes for their own protection. One Orpah left her. The other, Ruth, a Moabite, not a Hebrew, stayed with Naomi to care for her. She says, "Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, your God, my God." Naomi returned to Judea, to her native Bethlehem, along with Ruth. In her desperation, Naomi cried to the people there, "No longer call me Naomi, a name that means pleasant. Instead, call me Mara, a name that means bitter." Naomi and Ruth survived on gleaning whatever was left over in the barley fields after the harvesters finished their work. Remember when I read this for the first time, it clicked in my head. We used to have this happen all the time when we're harvesting potatoes. You'd always have people come and whatever the harvester didn't pick up, people would glean the fields and pick up. They'd ask my father first if that was okay. You don't want to. But usually my father was quite happy. It's like, go right ahead. They're going to go to waste if you don't pick them up. And it helped people who were willing to do that. And so whenever I first read this, like, and it was beautiful in the story too. God rewarded Ruth for her generosity to Naomi through a rich farmer, Boaz, who was attracted by the young woman's beauty, but more by her virtue and her plight. And so he told his laborers to be sure to leave enough for Ruth and Naomi to glean, harvest the field, but, you don't have to be too good today. Leave a little bit more for them. And eventually Boaz and Ruth married, and God rewarded them in a way beyond their fondest imagination. One of their great-grandchildren would be King David, and another descendant 1,000 years away would be Jesus Christ. So God can never be outdone in generosity. Now let's look at the widow of the gospel reading. Jesus' statement that she gave from her poverty, her whole livelihood, was a praise of her generosity. It was also a condemnation of society who had left her so destitute that she, like the widow of Zarephath, had nothing left to rely on. But she was rich. She was rich in faith. And Jesus contrasted the widow with those with money who gave from their surplus, but who did not have the faith to give from their need. Every time I hear this line, I keep thinking of a time I was visiting with my aunt and uncle, and they live in an area that's rather wealthy, and they went to a parish that was, there was a lot of people with means, and my uncle said he just pointed out a guy in front of me, and he was going through, when the collection was being taken up, he was going through his wallet, and he saw there was something in there, but then he closed it up and put it away. And he's like, he put it away because he realized he didn't have any ones amongst the other bills. He had plenty of 20s and 50s and maybe hundreds, but he didn't have any ones to throw in. So he put his wallet away. And my uncle said he would notice that he's like, when you think about people giving from their surplus, but not from their poverty. Yeah. Because sometimes, so often, the poor are more generous than the rich. That there's a realization that, well, I'm in need, maybe someone else might be in need. Maybe they could use something. And we probably had experiences like this. And not to say that those with means are not generous. I've encountered many. But in this particular case, this is in the gospel right here, this is what Jesus was chastising. But let's think about the widow in the gospel. How had this widow become impoverished? Had bankers mismanaged her money so that she had lost the little she had? Had shrewd people found ways to take advantage of her? Or was she merely a victim of the economic system of her day? How had it happened that society could take advantage of the destitute? How does it happen that society continues to take advantage of those who have no protection? Our recent popes, particularly St. John Paul II and Pope Francis, have written quite a lot about the sinful structures of society. St. John Paul II suffered from the reign of Nazi terror in Poland and the destruction of thought by the communists. He experienced the plight of the poor and the worship of unrestricted materialism of capitalists. St. John Paul II saw evil in all three: fascism, communism, and unrestrained materialistic capitalism. Pope Francis has been true to his determination to lead the church to be mindful of the poor. Both popes have written about ideologies that have held and continue to hold the world hostage to sin. And yet, they do not see these ideologies as some sort of kind of beings in their own rights. Rather, be they fascism, communism, unrestrained materialistic capitalism, these ideologies are constructed in such a way that they profit by preying on the helpless. They are established and supported by people whose sum total of personal sins have formed them into vehicles for their illicit gain. Those who formed and supported the Nazis' concept and glorification of Aryan supremacy saw their union as an opportunity to steal the goods and lands of other people, be they Jews within Germany or Europe, or Gypsies, Poles, Slavs, etc. Now, the Nazis were not aliens from another world. They were people like you and me who saw an opportunity to profit from the weakness of others. It was the sum total of personal sins that formed Nazism. There were many in Germany who were not Nazis, but who quietly supported them when they realized the gain they received through their sins. In the same way, communism evolved from the ideal of workers sharing equally in the profit of their work to the destruction of all morality by those who wish to steal the goods of some for the sake of others. Now, since morality and communism could not coexist, God had to be eliminated from a communist country. But the communists were also not aliens from another planet. They were people who sought to take advantage of others by devising a religion of the social order to replace the spirituality of God. Now, the complaints that both popes have made regarding unrestrained materialistic capitalism target those in business who disregard the rights of the impoverished for the sake of the wealthy. So if people in Latin, South America, Asia, Africa are living in a substandard existence so that Europeans and North Americans can benefit from cheap labor, so be it. If their people, children included, have to work in mines for cobalt and lithium so we can have our smartphones and electric cars, so be it. How has our society come to this? Because you see, this unrestrained materialistic capitalism did not fall out of the sky. It resulted from the number of people who firmly believe that the wealthy have the right to take advantage of the poor. Some will actually say might makes right. Others will cite an economic application of Darwinian evolution. The right people get the stuff, the wrong people don't. They will say and believe that the present situation of people in the world, the division of the world into the haves and have-nots, is merely the survival of the fittest. So this unrestrained materialistic capitalism like Nazism and communism is the sum total of personal sins, the decision to take advantage of the less fortunate for personal gain. Now we have quite a challenge here. Now we live in a capitalistic society. Although not unrestrained, there are restraints to it. And so therefore, we, the church, must be determined that the presence of God animate the decisions of business. And you and I, we've all seen this. We've seen people who operate and own business with the Lord in mind, not taking advantage of people, right? And so in us, we have to be committed to not allow the rich to gain from taking advantage of the poor. There's a balance to be struck there. We have to, in a sense, of that idea, we have to protect widows. And here the widows are those who may not have a voice for themselves. Anyone who may not, have a helpless position in our society. And any doctor will tell you the first step to healing is recognition of the sickness. And so we need to be aware that to the extent that we participate in the concept that some must lose so others can gain, we are uniting our personal sins of greed and materialism to the sum total of a sinful society. You know, for this, we need the mercy of God. And it's not that wealth is bad. What is wrong and sinful is using improper means to gain wealth. What is wrong and sinful is wasting wealth without regard to the poor around us. You know, and this is why we do these. We remember those around us by these little things that we engage with and do. Whether it's, you know, not looking at these Christmas trees that are in the narthex and in the connector and say, like, this is just a tag. No, there's a human being attached to this. Maybe in this they're able to know that they're loved, that they have hope. You know, by helping and maybe giving someone a meal at Thanksgiving, it's like, you know what? There are people thinking of me. And maybe I can make it, I got the strength to make it through. God communicating to me that, you know, yes, there's hope for the future. That little thing that, okay, I can trust in the Lord. This is a recognition. This is a a response that God is taking care of us. And it helps us. It helps us to not take for granted what we have and where we get it. It's, one of the things I sometimes do, even if I'm just simply eating my breakfast in the morning, I have to think of myself, how many hands have touched every element that brought this thing to my plate? From the person who picked the raw elements, people who maybe manufactured, who processed, who are they? What struggles do they have? Were they taken advantage of in their workplace? Are they going through some situations? Just in having a bowl of oatmeal, Jesus marveled that a widow who had so little gave to the temple treasury. He rejoices when those like her are cared for by society. And society is not this big blob idea. It's people. It's you and I. And so we should rejoice when there is care for the poor. Indeed, the strength of our society, and any society, is measured by the concern we have for our weakest members. And so when we think today, and we all come from different spots, we all are struggling with different things, and we may think, I have my own poverty. And I think that's when we think about the preferential option for the poor, it's this realization that we all experience poverty to some degree or another. And we are invited to meet others in their poverty, whatever that may be. For some, it may be a corporal poverty, something physical, hungry, thirsty, needing clothes, those things. For others, it's spiritual. How can we help and engage and encounter each other in our mutual poverty? To help one another know that there is hope for tomorrow. Hope that extends into eternity.